to break it into another video, which is this one. So, techniques. No, the sword, that's where I was going next. So, the sword. It can be used both-handed, it can be used with the right hand or the left hand. There is a bit where it says take it, take the sword in the hand. Is that the opponent's sword and you take his grip? Is that you're actually taking your own sword into a half sword technique? But anyway, looking at that and how often his feet are tied to the action of his hands. So most techniques are made either setting in or voiding out. There are some made standing in still. In fact, statistically, it's a third. A third of the actions are made moving in, setting in, which is the term he uses, and a third of the actions are made voiding out, and a third of the actions are made standing still. This strong tie between the weapon and the hand, to me, really does suggest that we're dealing with a long sword, or well, realistic, what they call a two-handed sword, a sword that can be used in two hands. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Everything from your long sword right up to your two-handed sword. And when you look at some of the English swords of the early 16th century, what you'll notice is they tend to have a long blade, long sword length blade, but they have huge grips, so that they come in at the size of a Zweihander or a Montante, in terms of as tall as me, if not taller. But the blade is still within silver's true length to some extent. It's very long for a true length, but they're there, 36, 37 inches on the blade, perhaps up to 40, with these whacking great huge handles. So that's the sword I'm going to go with, and I've done some of the flourishes and things with replicas of the one that's associated with Henry's armour in the Royal Armouries. By associated, not historically, it's associated as in terms of it's in the same exhibition. There are others kicking around in England and Wales, as well as in continental Europe as well. So it works with them, it works with a longsword. That's not going to be surprising to most people who study any of these arts. So then the next bit is obviously we need to move on to the terminology. This is where it gets really complicated, because as I said, all the words in those manuscripts are everyday words. And there were, even the ones which aren't for us were for them. Things like rabbets or rabbits. I don't like the use of animals. I don't see any use of animals in the manuscript beyond the dragon's tail with a pendant, which is the name of one play. And let's face it, I don't think even then there was that many dragons roaming around England. So I think it's a fanciful thing, and it's cool. But I think getting hung up on the idea that we've got all sorts of animals naming the plays in this is a bit daft. You know, people go with roebuck and things from the Harleian manuscript. Roebuck was an instrument. As far as I understand it, I'm not an expert on medieval instruments, so don't come at me on that. But anyway, terminology. Rounds, quarters. We've just briefly covered the quarter there. And you look at how the word is used within sources outside of the fencing manuscripts of around the late 15th, early 16th century, and it can mean anything. You've got the quarters of the shield. You divide a shield into four quarters. That's what it essentially means. You quarter a chicken if you're going to serve it up or cook it. So you cut it into quarters. Then we hit that thing where we get quarters made at the head, at the leg, down by the ground, through to the ground. So I think we have to accept that a quarter is a generic term. It has no specific technique attached to it. I basically took it as being any strike to any of the 4 quarters. A bit like in German, you get that Oberhau, a strike from above, any of them. It's not really relevant. Same with a quarter. It's about striking to one of the quarters. And if you're striking to one of the quarters, you're invariably going to do that through an angle. So a quarter essentially becomes an angled strike that can be made anywhere, in any sort of way. This makes it really hard to discuss and demonstrate how techniques work. When I was running a class, I ended up having to make things quite specific so that we could use them to describe different things. But realistically, it's a concept. It's not even a concept because it's nothing that thought through. But rounds are essentially a quarter, potentially. Downright strokes, potentially a quarter. Full strokes, certainly, type of quarter. And these are the things. So this is where we get into it. After that, and I mean, quarter is without a doubt the most common technique in there. Next one is probably rounds. This is where I tend to disagree with most of the people who are researching, as people have gone with rounds as being these following, flowing through things. Partly comes out of the eighth chase, possibly the tumbling chase anyway. And again, to me, yeah, that doesn't fit. The tumbling chase tells you how to do that, how to make these circular motions. So you get a downright stroke, voiding back the left foot, then void back the right foot as far as the left, then set in the right foot with another downright stroke. So we've got a concept going on there that creates this circular motion. So I'm not so keen on that. We've also got quarters that are made to the ground. So I don't really see rounds as being that. I teach them basically as a Zwirch. Zwirch how? Zwirch. Bearing in mind I studied German stuff 15 plus years ago. The world's moved on a lot since then. My interpretation of the German stuff possibly hasn't. And as far as, so the technical definition, I suppose, of a round is any horizontal strike that facilitates an action that follows that can be made either forward or backwards, which leads us into another problem. Forwards and backwards. Everybody knows what that means, so nobody's really thought about it. But I've gone through the manuscript and if he wants us to walk forwards, he'll tell us to set in a foot. And if he wants, or set forward, he does use the word forward in association with that, can't deny that. On the other hand, if he wants us to void back, to go back, sorry, he uses the word void back, or a quarter void, or the technique void. And then you've got things like set in the left foot, set in, move forwards, the left foot with a quarter backwards. Well, I can't set my foot in and void backwards at the same time. So forwards and backwards doesn't mean walking forwards and backwards. That's set and void. Void also, having to understand, can be a lot more vague, or not necessarily not vague. It's about finding space. So it does mean going backwards, voiding, but it doesn't mean you have to necessarily go in a straight line backwards. You can traverse backwards as you go. So as I say, I used to teach it as works because students needed something to be able to get their head around in order to be able to perform the exercises, to learn them. Because this is the thing with Ledall. If we go through, realistically, I think that I worked it out, there are 24 techniques in Ledall, and that's including from the right side and the left side. Ledall isn't about, if he does this, you do that. It isn't about a complex system in terms of techniques. There aren't lots of techniques. What we have is a really useful source that helps us look at the wider picture. Because we have these long techniques, up to 12 techniques long, these long combinations, we can do that's a naff shape. I need to correct that. It's quite hot today. You can't tell because I'm sat in this garage just plodding away, but outside is glorious sunshine. It's like up in 30 degrees and I'm ginger. I don't like temperature. I much prefer to hide. Ironically, I'm a field archaeologist when I'm working. So yeah, I teach them as these horizontal actions. Start with the false edge strike, and the other side comes with the true edge strike, and they come in pairs, hence doubles. You double from one side to the other. Now, depending on how your opponent responds to this, or your first one rather, how he responds to the first one is going to influence what you do. So if I come in with my round and he gives a parry, shall we say, static, well not static parry, but meets underneath and binds, his blade is between me and him, and that's all well and good. At this point what I can do is I can push forwards, so I take my horizontal strike and I move around his head, pushing his blade out of the way, and then strike horizontally to the other side. And like with the switch and the switch and all the other variations of it, that's horizontal for a given value of horizontal. It can be angled. You can come down at an angle. It'd be more of a quarter, but it would facilitate the same technique. What's really interesting with this is when we look at the touting bodies. So just go over again. I come in, get the bind through underneath, push it round, and slice through back on the other side. So in, extend, and cut, accompanied with footwork. I'm in a garage, tight view, so I'm not doing lots of footwork. There are 2, if not 3, of the remains from touting that have a single horizontal wound above the right eye. And it's horizontal, it's made horizontal, it lies horizontal, the angle that it's come in has been horizontal. And to me, this fits perfectly with this technique. Through, push through his guard so that you're onto the inside, and then snap back, coming through and into his head. Is it a killing blow? No. Does it need to be a killing blow? No. You've just rattled his skull. You've put blood into his eye. It's going to facilitate other techniques. And we look at Ledall, there's always more techniques. So double round forwards, boom. Double round backwards, boom. Backwards, so yeah, sorry, backwards. So forwards, binds underneath with a parry. I can push through and come through. Now, if I come in with a horizontal blow and he comes down over the top to dominate me, and collapses on top of it, stops it coming through. If I try to go forwards and push his blade out of the way, pushing my hands forwards, his blade is on top, it's going to push his blade into my face and allow him to wind and attack me, basically, before I get my other technique. So I then come backwards, quite literally backwards. Bring the hands backwards, bring the blade backwards until you're disengaged, re-engage on his blade, and then step in and double round to the other side. Is it right? Is it definitely what Ledall said meant? Never going to know, nobody is, but it fits within the description, it fits within their language. Backwards is often, somebody can be stood backwards of the hall, at the back of the hall, moving backwards, or move backwards, you know. So I suppose that's, I'll finish that bit and wrap that bit up. Forwards and backwards are concepts of the blade potentially at the bind. In fact, I will say specifically at the bind. And it's quite interesting to note that in our chases, which people perceive as being attacking sequences, I think I've got to a more complex understanding. People think chase, to attack, to chase your quarry, or to counter, to beat somebody who's trying to attack you. And without a doubt, the chases involve you attacking first, and the counters involve you defending first, if my interpretation of a proffer rate quarter is correct. And there are certainly several times where he mentions within the counters stuff that would suggest it's a defensive action. But interestingly, forwards and backwards only really features within the chases. Double rounds forwards, double rounds backwards, a couple of quarter backwards. Once you get into the counters, those things just do not exist. There are no quarter backwards, there are no double rounds forwards or backwards. You get quarter voids setting in, there's all sorts of things, but this working from blade pressure and pushing through or pulling off and being soft and pulling around it, these things disappear completely. So to that extent, I think the chases are describing a separate system to the counters within the same system. So the chases are about, yes, attacking your opponent, but about when you're attacking your opponent that you're constantly using blade pressure. But it's about more than attacking your opponent. It has to be, because there are bits where we're voiding backwards. Now that could be creating space, but I think it's to do with learning within the system that is the chases how to cope with losing and gaining initiative. And that through the chases, they're done via the bind. So you get all these techniques forwards and backwards, loads of back thrusts and things. And yes, the back thrusts are made, so you do get literally a back thrust voiding back the right foot. If you're voiding, then it doesn't matter, but you also get back thrusts sitting in the left, so or standing still at least. So it's about looking at finding the bind and thrusting from the bind. All sounds rather German. This bind and wind technique. The counters, on the other hand, as I say, have none of this. It's all quarters, boom, boom. You're moving from one area to another area all the time. Well, not always to another area. So you sometimes do get a proffer rate quarter and another, and a void. So that you're building up patterns, but you're essentially, the counter system is based on denying your opponent the bind. It's a counter to the chase system rather than the chases themselves, or to an opponent attacking you, because again, it deals with gaining and losing and regaining initiative. And that's what Ledall really, really teaches, is how to manipulate your opponent, how to cope with the loss of initiative, how to deal with the fact that that initiative is robbed from you in a way that is practical and understood by the body rather than necessarily the mind. So that's that one. So I think we'll stop there, because we're probably hitting lengthy videos again. And when we come back, I might actually done some more on this without you looking. Okay.